Hey, Joe Brunsman here, cyber insurance broker to the stars, back with another interesting video for you. HHS OCR has come alive once again, and this is going to be the Dark Overlord Death Spiral edition. So let's jump into it. All right, first of all, this agreement is not an admission, concession, or evidence of liability for Athens Orthopedic, further known as AOC here on out. All right, so what actually happened? Well, on June 26, 2016, a journalist from databreaches.net, which, by the way, if you have not looked into that, highly recommended it, notified AOC that a database of patient records were posted online for sale. On June 28th, the hacker group known as the Dark Overlord contacted this company by email and demanded money in return for a complete copy of the database it stole without sale or further disclosure. So they did the forensics, and it was determined that the Dark Overlord had obtained a vendor's credentials to AOC's system and used them to gain access on June 14th. Now, while AOC had terminated the comprised credentials on June 27th, so you have a pretty big lag there, that's about 2 weeks' time, where it looks like the Dark Overlord was in this system and nobody knew about it. So even though they terminated those credentials, it still took more than 2 weeks for them to effectively block that intrusion from the Dark Overlord. So kind of the lesson there is, when someone gets into your system, it's not as simple as just revoking access and then they're gone. The Dark Overlord, highly sophisticated, and it looks like they probably stole some additional credentials. They were just all over the place. So ultimately, it was determined that about 200,000 individuals were affected by this breach, including essentially PHI and a ton of other private information. The alleged violations here are quite lengthy. We'll kind of jump through them here. So allegedly, AOC failed to prevent unauthorized access to ePHI, retain copies of their HIPAA policies and procedures, which is just mind-blowing. From September 30th, 2015 to December 15th, 2016, so over a year, the requirement to implement sufficient hardware, software, and or procedural mechanisms that record and examine activity in information systems that contain or use ePHI. Until August 7th, 2017, the requirement to enter into business associate agreements with the following associates. The requirement to provide its entire workforce with HIPAA training. I mean, that is just mind-blowing that you have these many records and allegedly you just weren't providing HIPAA training. I don't know what else to say about that. The requirement to conduct an accurate and thorough assessment of the potential risks and vulnerabilities, so essentially just a risk assessment. And the requirement to implement security measures sufficient to reduce the risks and vulnerabilities to a reasonable and appropriate level. So, of course, this is the Death Spiral edition. What actually happened here? Well, HHS OCR, they came in after this breach, and look what happened. The investigation death spiral. I've said it again. I've said it in multiple videos before this, but when a regulator comes in to investigate you following a breach, you better make sure you have your ducks in a row. That is not the time where you just want to disclose, hey, we haven't been doing all of these things. That will come to bite you, and in this case, it certainly did. So OCR discovered long-standing systemic noncompliance with HIPAA privacy and security rules by Athens Orthopedic, including failures to conduct, as we said before, risk analysis, implement risk management and audit controls, maintain HIPAA policies and procedures, secure business associate agreements with multiple business associates, and provide HIPAA privacy rule training to workforce members. All right, so what is now required? They have to go into, well, obviously, you have this corrective action plan, but also they got fined $1.5 million. Now, of note for this corrective action plan, maybe that fine was actually insurable, but the correction active plan, all this money that's going to have to be dumped into this, probably not insurable. As a matter of fact, I'd say probably 99% probability that it's not insurable. So I'm not going to read all this to you. It is quite lengthy, but we're just going to scroll through here. You're more than welcome to look this up actually on the HHS OCR website. But needless to say, that is a lot of stuff that they have to be doing. And oh, by the way, Uncle Sam is going to be checking on you. And you don't want to be like this little guy right here, this little Walter Mitty character sitting all alone, kind of wondering how you're going to make this happen. So let's look at some of the lessons learned here real briefly. So first of all, I said it before, I'll say it again, don't poke the bear. Don't poke the bear. You don't want to get into that investigation death spiral because it will happen to you. All right, it looks like, this particular organization, obviously I'm not privy to the inner workings there, but it looked like they were just overwhelmed for cybersecurity, or rather the lack thereof. How that happened, I have no idea. But regardless, if you're a company out there and you're watching this now and you're like, this is just so much to do, how do I do this? Right? It's like, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. You have to start somewhere. Why? Ultimately, someone's going to discover your breach. In this incident, thankfully they got a little bit of a heads up from a security researcher, but nonetheless, someone's going to figure out eventually that you don't have the right policies, procedures, and controls in place, and they're going to exploit that, and it is going to be a much more painful time for you than if you just started attacking this one bite at a time. All right, also, once they're in your system, a lot of people think, oh, we just revoke access and then we go from there. It's not that simple. It is literally a fight to the death, if that is a sophisticated hack, to get them out of your system. Because maybe now they have other credentials that they're using. Maybe you don't know what devices are allowed to access your network or not. And then from there, you might very well need to just shut the entire thing down, reissue credentials to all of your staff, all of your employees, all those third-party vendors that may have access to your system. And that is going to cost a lot of money, and it's going to be very painful. All right, next, obviously, I'm a cyber insurance guy. Reassess your cyber insurance coverage. If you do catch yourself in a situation where your system has been breached, obviously you want to make sure that you are appropriately covered for those breaches. Now, I will say, you want to do your best to never call a guy like me, right? So obviously, yes, you need cyber insurance for me or whoever else is qualified to give that to you. But you really want that to be like worst case scenario, defense in depth has failed. So with that, work with a qualified legal expert to determine what your particular compliance needs are. Speak with your MSP or your IT providers. I know a lot of them out there are, particularly irked that sometimes, healthcare providers just don't seem to take HIPAA seriously, but this is absolutely your warning. All right. This is where you can go to download a free copy of my book, also available on Amazon if you would like to support the cause. And with that, stay safe.